Safi,
Yes, sir.
welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me in your
Restaurant.
Yeah, in your restaurant. This is
Yeah.
awesome. Introduce yourself, man.
My name is Safi. I'm a filmmaker with an earth sciences background, and I've been doing my thing in the Netherlands for a while now. And I'm here to talk about the recent political issues that we've been having in the Netherlands.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just going to let you the mic. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
This is just sin because most of the time I've been trying to lead the podcast in a certain way. But
Yeah.
you're just going to give me your input and we're just going to
It's
discuss.
just going to be a conversation.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
just going to discuss racism and the best even would be for you to give me some example of your
Of racism.
exactly of what you encounter in the Netherlands. You know, that's even the best.
You know what I like to do when it comes to racism? What I like to do is I like to objectify as because I have a scientific background.
Yeah.
And what we do in science is we objectify.
Yeah.
The thing that we're talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
before we start talking about racism, let's define it.
Very good. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So racism to me is it's hidden in the way that you're nurtured. So most of the time when people talk about racism, they more or less talk about their personal experiences, and that's almost where we would start this conversation.
Exactly.
But racism, to me, is a social dilemma of choice.
Okay.
Because the choices we make daily are based on the way that we're brought up. So racism is a deficiency in the way we are raising our children. Because the choices they'll be making later on life can either express themselves in a racist way
Mm-hmm.
because they've been nurtured in the wrong way.
Okay.
So let's talk about racism in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then an example of the way that we're wrongly nurtured is that we're not treating our colonial history the way we should, in my opinion.
I totally agree. I think this is we have to start from the beginning. We have to
Yeah.
start what you exactly talking about. It has to start from where it started,
Yeah.
and by starting from the roots, then you can heal it.
Yeah.
But you
yes,
cannot
yes.
fix things by starting where it is now and
Yeah.
just like go back. No,
Yeah.
because then you have all that left over that none said and everything underlying that just will come back up at some point. So,
Yeah.
and this is what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
Take everything apart, all the shells out,
Yes.
side
Start
to side.
at the base, the
Exactly.
fundament of what racism is.
Yeah.
And then the thing is also, as a black community, I think we're way beyond this point of emotion.
Yeah.
Now we have to structurally describe what it is. And then we can get to invent and think about countermeasures.
Yeah.
Because I think the conversation about racism shouldn't always be at the subjective and emotional level. I believe that if we first start to describe what racism is,
Mm-hmm.
then we can really talk about how to counter it.
Very good. And this is why I urge the people following the podcast since the beginning and
Yeah.
also what I've been posting on social media to go back and read. And
Yeah.
again, I'm going to bring back this book, The Myth of Race.
Yes.
Amazing book, that
Yeah.
one. With all the elements and all the anthropological details about how the systemic racism was actually introduced and installed and developed within our Western culture.
Exactly.
And this is the book you have, and you're saying it perfectly. If you don't know where it's coming from and you don't know the roots of the virus in itself,
Yeah.
then you cannot figure it out and you cannot cure it.
It's very
So-
hard to fix, and that's the thing. If you look at the discussion nowadays, it's more or less based on subjective experiences.
Mhm.
But if we get a collection of subjective experiences, it still doesn't describe what racism is. It describes the result
Yeah.
of racism.
Consequences.
The
yes.
consequence is
Mhm.
described and I'm for me personally, I'm done with describing racism
Mhm.
because we have a clear description of the consequences of racism.
Yeah.
But now let's give it a definition.
Mhm.
And I think from a social sciences perspective, you start with the way we nurture ourselves. So if you're a 5-year-old, and for example, you learn that our colonial heritage is a golden age,
Mm-hmm.
then if there's a protest against that golden age when you're 18, you won't be able to understand why that protest is.
Exactly.
And I think the big difference between people of color and people that are white is that when they were nurtured, people of color had to do their own research about where they're from. And a 5-year-old black child will probably hear about slavery before a 5-year-old white child has heard. So to me, it's not that we're fighting each other. It's not a black versus white thing.
No.
It's not about black people have done their homework and white
Mhm.
people haven't. It is the system of nurturing that doesn't allow a white person to understand the pain of a black person and doesn't allow a black person to learn about his colonial history and where he's
Precisely.
from.
Precisely. No one is being given the tools and the
Exactly.
platform to learn. And because you have all those great books that
Yeah.
you can find out there that are just published and all those great movies.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we know it. Government have all the interest, and the politics are to push another agenda than pushing people to actually understand the other
Exactly.
and finding common goals and unite.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the
yeah.
goal is to divide, of course, all
Yes.
the time, and that's the main reason why we do not find those platform very easily, or
Yeah.
they're not made available to the public. And as you were saying, that's very interesting. I struggle most of my life finding my history
Yeah.
because I, and I think it's also, like I mentioned in one of the podcasts, also a bit more complex for mixed people because our situation is really like, yeah, well, we don't hate on each other, we both, so
Yeah.
we know exactly where we're coming from on both sides, but nothing defines what mix is.
Exactly.
You are pretty much this thing in a limbo. You're both of them, but that's it.
Yes. Yes.
But learning about and appreciating and being comfortable with being black,
Yeah.
that's what pushed me to really look into my history.
Yeah.
And up until a few weeks ago, I wasn't at peace with that side of me because it wasn't being seen
Yes.
and wasn't appreciated not appreciated, let's say seen and actually recognized. That's the word.
Yeah.
It wasn't recognized.
Yeah. It wasn't recognized.
It wasn't
indeed.
recognized, and now it is. It is like, woo! I'm feeling like, okay.
And the thing is, why isn't it recognized? Because people haven't been nurtured to recognize it,
That's it.
and that's the thing.
Mhm.
If you want to talk about police brutality, if you want to talk about people of color having less, percentually less job opportunities,
Yeah.
that's all. That's all of that
Mhm.
is the consequence of choice.
And one major thing. One word with, what is it? 6 letters. Profit.
Yeah. Yeah. Profit is the same thing.
It's the same,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
go on the same level.
They go on
and
the same
that's
level,
what
yeah.
has been driven this flow pretty much.
Let's say that's what has been driving choice.
Yeah.
And racism is factually a choice.
Yeah.
A choice you're making not to take in the person of color, but to trust the person that is white.
Yeah.
And that a person making that choice is based on the way that you're nurtured. Now we get to think about, okay, how could we countermeasure? What are probable countermeasures for racism? And in my opinion, it's that we should rethink the way that we're nurtured.
Very much.
Completely.
It starts from the beginning, from
It
school.
yeah.
It starts from everywhere.
History.
And also, it starts from, it begins in every household.
Yes.
That's where it begins.
Yeah.
This is the starting point, the family, and then it goes out into the community, and
Yeah.
then it goes into the system and society at last. But it doesn't start, like you mentioned, in society. It
Yeah.
starts with the family and giving input about the history, like you
Yes.
said.
Exactly.
And it starts with every family teaching and nurturing their kid and explaining them this
Yeah.
is like this, but this is not the real word.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is not
yeah,
how
yeah.
it happens. This
True.
is not how it happened, and this is how it should be.
Exactly.
And don't really. But we live in a society where a lot of people have. They don't really spend that much time to after school, even if they've been asked to after school. And we had an extra education. We went to university, you and
Yeah.
I, but a lot of people didn't made it to university. And
Yeah.
for them, the main goal is to assure the basic necessities in life, and
Yeah.
after find some comfort on vacation and spending
Yeah.
some cash here and there. And it's very complex to for a lot of people to be able to think and have time to get in more knowledge on
Yeah.
top of all the noise around them, just
Exactly.
to make them sleep, work,
Yeah.
commute, sleep.
Your life is already planned ahead of you
Exactly.
because of the job or the
Yeah.
social position that you have.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying this nurturing system, education is a big part of the way
Mhm.
we're nurtured.
Yeah.
So a countermeasure to racism could be that kids from the age kids that are in Dutch you would say leerplichtig.
Okay, they're
How do you call that?
th-
Going to school is mandatory,
That's it.
and it's mandatory to a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
And within that age group, and I think that's from 4 years. In the Netherlands, it's from 4 to 16 or something.
Same in France, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. Having to go to school, that period where having to go to school is mandatory,
Mm.
that's where the nurturing is a big part of forming you as a human being.
Yeah.
And what I think is that the colonial history should be actively, should be an active subject within that time period of a human being. And the thing is that when you talk to people that oppose this system,
Mm-hmm.
the best example that you can give is Germany.
Yeah.
Germany actively teaches its population about its Nazi history.
It does, and a lot of people are not aware of that.
And a
but
lot
it
of
does.
people aren't aware of that.
And the monument have actually symbols on them saying that this is a Nazi monument or blah blah blah.
Yes.
It just actually mentions it.
Yeah.
But I think that's because of the history.
Yeah.
They've been shamed. They've been defeated
Yeah.
by the West.
Yeah.
But the West, as France, Spain, the UK, the US, Australia, has never been defeated like Germany has been defeated.
No, no.
And this is the main reason.
Yeah.
If France, the US,
You have
and
to
Australia-
explain why you're defeated. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's completely
it.
true. Yeah.
That's it. It's basic and it's there why you are defeated. But if you are winning all the time, well, you only talk about your winning achievements, but
Yeah.
you don't talk about the process and what
Of defeat.
the process of
Yeah,
defeat.
yeah. And I
That's
think
it like that.
it's very important that we as the Netherlands recognize that this should be a big part of the curriculums in schools. And there's no shame in having to explain it. It's only honesty. But to me, I think with most people defending the idea of our colonial history, I'm not sure if people are ready to have that conversation yet. Because if you look at, there has been this surge of people removing statues in America.
Yeah.
And this surge is also going across Europe, and we've seen it a little bit in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Now, today, in my eyes, one of the most important newspapers, the Volkskrant,
Mm-hmm.
put in a article claiming that historians should be included in this debate. Now, that sounds like a good title. But at the same time, in the article, they were talking about the fact that only 10% of the Dutch total trade, the upbringing, the profit of the Dutch total trade was has had something to do with slavery. Now, here's something that I'll show you is we're measuring with two sticks,
Yeah.
And the thing is,
But that's a very Dutch thing, huh?
yeah, it's a very Dutch thing. And I'll show you exactly how, because the Volkskrant says it's only 10%. Slave trade has only been 10%. Now, if we go to Algemeen Dagblad in 2018,
Yeah.
they cite the Rotterdamse haven, the biggest harbor of Europe,
Yeah.
being 6.2% of the Dutch national product. So now, on the first hand, we have the Volkskrant saying it's only 10%. But then again, in another, we say, oh, the Rotterdamse haven is 6.2% of our total. Wow, it's the biggest harbor in Europe. While the slave trade was almost twice as high. To
Yeah.
be precise, 161%
Yeah.
more affected.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first article, you want to say it's only been 10%, and then
Yeah.
in the second one, you want to say, oh wow, it's 6.2. It's the biggest harbor in the world, and we're only talking about the Netherlands. Slavery has been for Spain, Portugal, the Americas, England,
France. Bring in France, please.
so many countries.
Yeah, it's I mean, and I've seen a lot of articles actually mentioning and just talking about what the slave trade and the money from the slave trade has brought to the Netherlands, and how many infrastructure you were able to build
Yeah.
and develop because of the slave trade, and then
Yeah.
the money it brought you, and all the canals, all the
Yeah.
racht, which made actually Holland being above sea level.
Exactly.
So it means without slave, you'll be underwater.
Yes, and the
I mean,
thing is,
basically.
you don't have to. We don't have to tell that story with that tone.
No,
but
of course.
The story should be told so that people can understand the relationships that they have together.
I agree with you in a way. We don't have to say with this tone, but when you have the media, I'm all about being diplomatic and
Yeah.
and those things, and approaching things with a tone that is a bit of a kickback tone, and being all conciliant with of everyone's opinion.
I think you can be sharp. You can be sharp.
That's it.
You know?
Because when the Volkskrant, like you say,
Yeah, they're
is,
sharp as well.
is demonizing,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
effect. Oh, but dude, it was still slavery.
Exactly.
Man. It doesn't matter if it's
Exactly.
10%, even 2%, you were involved. Assume your act, assume your history, and by assuming that,
But-
because this is what we're being taught all
But
the
think
time.
about it. Think about it. They say it's only 10%, which makes you feel that it's only a tenth of the whole pie.
Yeah,
But the biggest harbor in Europe
which means it's more. It represents a lot more.
adds 6.2%.
Mm-hmm.
So think about the insanity, because this is only the Netherlands and the biggest harbor in Europe. So
Yeah.
not any country
Mm-hmm.
in Europe has a harbor that gets them 6.2% of their total national product.
Yeah, no one.
So think about the fact that in Netherlands it was 10, and then there's France, it was probably another 10. Let's just say for all the countries it
Mhm.
was 10. So every country in Europe that had a slave trade would have the biggest would have 161%
Yeah,
of the biggest harbor in Europe now.
exactly.
So the scale is immense.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think that's where I think we kind of fail. It's the tone that we're portraying our colonial history with makes that white people cannot understand their relation with people of color, and people of color have to do their own research to find out their history.
Yeah.
And that's where I think is the flaw, because we're not ready to have the conversation of what binds us together, and that is our colonial history. And I think that's, it's a pity in some way, because people that study history, so is it historian or historic?
Historians.
Historians, they don't actively get involved in this conversation, and those people have had a high education as well. So for me, there's a reason why they don't get involved, because they know it's a hard truth to swallow.
I remember having history in France and having history in America. You can go your entire career and your entire university years, I mean, as a student in America, without talking one single time about slavery.
Exactly.
Your entire study years, you can go, and this is such a strong thing in America. But based on which classes you select, you may never even hear about like slavery. You heard about it, of course, because you live in America, but you may have never heard of it because you never had it in the classroom, and you
Yes.
may never have gone in details if you haven't talked about, if you haven't done African American studies.
Exactly.
It's included in African American studies, and so we talk about the historians and all those things, and if we begin with acknowledging the fact that yes, we need to have more education about racism,
Yes.
about including members of societies that are minorities and with a darker skin complexion, and begin treat them after 500 years of a break
Yeah.
like regular people. Then start arising question regarding assets
Yes.
and possessions in
Yeah.
old.
Old money
Colon-
and old colonies and things like that. And
That's it.
I completely agree on you when it comes to this, that the correct history is not part of our institutional system, nurturing system. But I do think also that the fact that it is not in prevents people that are white from understanding their relation with people of color. And what we also tend to forget in history is that white people aren't evil,
No.
not at all.
No.
As a matter of fact, in the times of slavery, there were white people opposing slavery.
And mainly also the church for many
Exactly.
years. But then due to the how do you say the proof brought and the ideas brought by anthropologists and also people that were studying genetics at the time, they have been convinced. But for a long time, until the 1800 something, most people were opposing slavery. Quite a
Exactly.
few.
And
And-
then we get back to what you were saying, the 6-letter word, profit.
And that's what it came down to.
And that's
It's
what
like-
it comes down to.
Exactly.
Because,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. The reason why we're not, at least I think we are getting together now, because if you look at the protest nowadays, it is persons of every color.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think people have been there, but
They're open about it now.
that's it. We all have been. I mean, you've been active on your side. I've been active
Yeah.
on my side as well, taking a break from time to time because I felt like I was swinging a sword just in the air. You know,
Yeah.
nothing was catching it in a
No.
way. You know, it was just exhausting and then just tiring. But now that the playground is open, people are like, okay, now we linked up.
Yes.
We linked up on one thing, and after one thing, something else will happen. We linked up
Yeah.
on many other things, but now we linked up. We connected.
Yeah.
And it's funny enough, we have all those devices of connection. And I was having the discussion with a buddy the other day. We've never been so isolated in our life with those devices, the phones and social media. But for once, social media is doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, it's a
Being
catalyzer.
social
Yeah.
and connecting people.
Yeah.
For once. It has been until now, since its creation in 2004 by Facebook, isolating people and just being like, check me out. This is what I've been accomplishing in a certain way. And all of us who've been fitting that and we've been into it, and in a way or another, all of us. But for the first time, is working on a social way, not
Yes.
economical.
Yeah.
Social.
Yeah. And I think that I firmly believe that because of this, people are connected to each other. And because of this, you see a change in the nature of these strikes. Because the type of person that goes there changes. It's white, it's black, it's every color that we have is at those protests.
Yeah.
And I believe that looking at the fact that people opposed slavery back in the 17th century, I believe that idea of those people then
Mm-hmm.
is in the people that are at the protests now.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that, because the only reason for slavery was profit.
That's it.
It's that simple. It's egotistical people that wanted to go for a big profit. That's why the
That
East
was it.
Indian Company was
That
one
was
of
it.
the first multinationals.
That's what I mentioned in the first podcast as
Yeah.
well. It's the first multinational, and the ideas at the time, on top of having those ideas of black people being at the bottom of the race ladder, was also, encouraging the ideas of the, you know how the Spanish Inquisition started,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was about because some Jewish people were becoming rich, so they decided to just drive them out. They didn't want them to be part of the aristocratic life of Spain and Portugal.
Yeah.
So it's the same. This is how it started. So you drive people out. It started with us, and then it went to the gypsies, and it went to everyone. But at a point, those ideas came back and were recycled again in the 1800s. And when it came back to the people with the most wealth were supposed to be on top, and the people who needed the help and were socially in need were supposed to be at the bottom and were supposed to be servants.
Yeah.
And when you don't have enough, like labor hands to work on something, where you had to go find in a cheap labor. And that's what happened with slavery.
Yeah.
But what you are talking about now is exactly that: the profit based for, let's say, the 8 people on the top in this world that have half of the poorest of half of the world wealth in their hands.
In earth sciences figures, it's 20% of the people that use up 80% of its resources, and 80% of the rest of the world using 20%.
That is
of it.
insanity and obscene.
That's obscene.
Obscene.
Yeah.
It is-
And the fact is that it's not their resources.
It
they're
is
using
not.
up.
It is not.
Yeah.
And we've been thinking about those things for years. Probably for me, it's been since high school. I've
Mhm.
been revolted about those things. I've been reading about those stuff, and there
Yeah.
was always this sense of revolution inside of me, and of a why. What is the
Yeah.
the reason for that? And finally, we getting there to that point.
Yeah.
Did you grow
Way.
up? How did you grow up in the Netherlands? Because
I was born in Suriname.
you were born in Suriname.
Yes.
Yeah, you see, that's awesome. How long did you live there?
I lived there until I was, I think, 5 or 6.
Same as me. I was born in Cameroon, lived there until I was 6, 7,
Yeah.
and then moved to France. And in the Netherlands, did you grow up in a community that was pretty tight with a lot of people from Suriname, or did you?
At first. So
Okay.
we went from Paramaribo, we went to the Belmer,
Yeah.
lived there for 3 years, and that was indeed a community where people are very tight. A lot of
Exactly.
people from Surinamese or Ghanese or
Africa,
Nigerian
yeah,
African
yeah.
culture. And then I moved to Zaandam, and that was an all-white neighborhood.
So how was that moving from?
For me, some of my best friends come from there.
Yeah.
And I think that because I'm a very open person, and I think I like to believe that most of the time my energy is good,
Yeah.
I didn't get or didn't see the anything of racism or anything of colorism. And but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Coming from a scientific point of view, I know that racism exists. So me not having a lot of these experiences, or almost not having these experiences at a younger age, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean I'm not a person of color. You know?
I'm asking you this because you're the fourth person that I speak to, and I'm trying to. It's quite interesting because it's almost like a research work that we're doing with this podcast.
Yeah.
What environment actually triggers more racism towards a person,
Yeah.
or in which where you live and all that. And Zaandam, for the people who don't know, it's like right outside the suburbs of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much Amsterdam. So
It's
it's a
pretty
big
much
city.
Amsterdam. Yeah.
And it seems like to me that, based on what you are saying, in cities like Amsterdam, around that, it's pretty okay because people are used to see black people
Yes.
and other minorities
Yeah.
and color people. But when it comes down to outside of Amsterdam
Yes.
and small places, this is
Yes.
more where you are more inclined to be victim of
Yeah.
really strong racism
Yeah.
with people with less education.
And I think that is because in Amsterdam and in the Randstad, as we call it, you learn by example. So you staying with a black person or white person or Turkish person or somebody from Cape Verde or
Yeah.
somebody from Morocco,
Yeah.
and having their food, having a laugh with them is learning by example.
Yeah.
And in those villages outside of Amsterdam, they don't have these examples. And that's where they have to be nurtured about their relationship with people of color. And that's not in the curriculum.
No.
So what do you get? You get these isolated islands that think that they have no relationship with people of color.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason why people of color eventually come to their country has a historical fundament. And if you don't understand that historical fundament, you don't understand your relationship with these people.
And you don't understand where you come from.
You don't understand
And your country.
Yes, and you don't understand your country. You don't
Yeah.
understand where you come from.
Yeah.
Because I had a discussion recently, and I asked, what would Dutch supermarkets look like? Yeah, if we didn't have a relationship.
Potatoes.
Yeah, if we didn't have a relationship with all these people from all these countries. The fact that coffee is a must in this country, and people don't understand that coffee is made by people of color in Africa. That is why we need to nurture people. That is why we need to make people understand their relationship with people of color, because they feed this country.
Even the fruits. Your fruits come from Spain. Oh,
Exactly.
Okay, the exotic fruits come from from tropical places, but your fruits here and your tomatoes come from Spain.
Yes.
But who are the people working in those warehouses and those greenhouses?
Exactly.
Well, most of the time refugees from Africa and Northern Africa.
Exactly.
So they're the ones actually feeding you and
Yeah.
making sure you have enough food to sustain
To
and
eat.
having that to eat and
Yes.
to be fine. So that's a very good one. And imagine if all the time we have everywhere this food comes from this country. This is with the photo of
a person that made it.
exactly the person that made it or just picked it up, harvested it.
Yeah.
Not the company that does it because it's probably owned by a Westerner. So let's put it out, and the money never goes back to the people in the
No.
end.
Not
But
significantly, not enough
no,
at all.
Not at all, and that's also a big problem that
Yeah,
needs to be
I think as well.
assessed. But that will be for another talk, I think. But like you're saying, and the fact as well that those people in small towns are just eating and just binging on
Yeah.
media without thinking most of the time, just
Yeah.
the news and going for the big headlines without
Yeah.
questioning it. And the first thing I always say is like, turn off your TV.
Please. Yeah.
Turn off your TV. It's just fake news.
Yeah. No.
It's terrible. It's just it only brings one view with one interest and doesn't bring you the full story, the full scope of
Exactly.
it.
And the thing is, for those people, it's too late because they get to choose. They get to choose what they read. They get to choose what they look
That's
at.
it.
Now, from that age, from 4 to 16, you don't get to choose. And I think understanding your history is just as important as being able to read, write, and calculate. Because understanding your history that's what you base your choices on. Understanding your relationship with other human beings is what you base your choices on later in life. And that is exactly what racism is.
Yeah.
It is a social dilemma of choices that people make. And those choices can end up being racist without that person understanding why they're racist. Same goes for Zwarte Piet.
Which the European Parliament,
Is now kicking out.
hell yeah.
But please,
But there are laws for
Yeah.
people to realize this as well. It's not a yay as a victory because we know there are laws, anti-racist laws, and
Mhm.
about you need to employ as in an equivalent way
yes.
color people and white people, but they're not being applied.
Yeah, no. But the
So-
fact that those quota are here,
Yeah,
it all suggests of a failing of nurturing people.
yeah,
Look at the fact that people don't. It's so bad. People don't understand their relationship with people of color that they don't see racism in Zwarte Piet. There's also a Spanish tradition
I know with
where
the
people
Moors.
have where people have blackface on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that just testifies that the relationship that we have is not understood.
Yeah.
For most, because all the people that do understand there, and that's a lot, they're there, but there's still a big way to go.
A big way to go.
I like to express things in statistics. So I believe a few days ago on TV, we saw that in 2013, 91% of the Dutch people opposed the removal of Zwarte Piet.
Yeah, I saw that statistic as well.
And this year, 47%.
Yeah.
And this is what education and nurturing can do. Now apply that to schools and apply that to 17 million people, and I believe that you could change racism. You can change the face, at least change the face and the fact of racism and the outcome of racism within one generation.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be another 50 years.
No, it won't be. I will make sure of that. Trust me.
Exactly.
I'm putting my face on this table.
On this
is
thing,
I'm
yeah.
on a mission.
Exactly.
I'm on a mission. That fire is not going out. But
Yeah.
and like you're saying, the numbers went down as well because people have been active.
Yeah.
People have been protesting.
Yeah.
People have been making noise, and that's also one of the big elements because people have been out there, not just on the couch, in here,
Yes.
in a feeling.
And also, discussion is a form of education. It's a form of nurturing people.
This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is why
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is so important.
It's important, yeah. Shall I tell you another thing? I work in advertising.
Yeah.
Now, think of this, that most of the time, if we look on our phone, if we look on any screen, or if we walk through a city or a busy street, you are being communicated to by people from the advertising industry constantly.
Yeah.
Now, those people have a big responsibility in spreading norms and values. And if those norms and values are constantly white, that's where the conditioning of people starts. I work in the advertising industry, and the advertising industry is the number one industry that doesn't only communicate, but it spreads norms and values. And what I think is important about that idea is that within the advertising agency, we only look at, for example, how many products have we sold from this type of communication. And all the ads that we see, the ideas, come from people that are called creatives. And what I think, at least in the Dutch industry, what I think is that these creatives very well understand how to sell a product, but they forget that it's also their responsibility on the values and norms the creativity communicates.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the industry from whenever I was born to nowadays, you see that it's predominantly white. And that means that the creatives behind these predominantly white ideas, there's a lack of either understanding or education when it comes to understanding the social fundament or the social context that their commercial or social media content is being put in, and the consequence of that on people. And I think that the advertising industry, of course, your number one goal is to sell a product, but I think the discussion now should be about what are the side effects of selling our products the way we do, and is using a white white fundament, is that still effective? Because people that now have the buying power, especially from our generation, are all colors. And if we don't recognize ourselves, then...
Well, I've never. And this is what I talked in my first podcast, like my mom had to go dig in because, you know, the black role models were not available in France to be seen, like you mentioned, on TV, in the newspaper, in a magazine, nowhere to be found. So you had to go and dig into the black culture, not culture, black culture.
Yeah,
black
separated.
Culture,
yeah,
exactly, black culture, to figure out that okay, there are role models out there, and like you're saying, and this is a thing, like all models want to quit, like myself.
Yeah.
But one thing that's been keeping me in the business is that reason. Like, I remember myself as a kid, and I know that having a mixed person, a black person like this, can make just a little difference. For one kid or whatever, I would just stay there. And it's really what I'm there and staying in the business because, of course, financially is nice, but the main reason is that, the main drug, like you're mentioning. And unfortunately, we know, like you said, that there are numbers behind. You have to satisfy the investors. You have to 6-letter word, make profit.
Yeah.
And like you say, at a certain point, like for the earth, how we're using the earth, all the profit so much more important and than what we're losing.
Yeah.
And the consequences it would lead to in the future.
Exactly.
Do we really want that?
And this concept that you're talking about is called the Earth carrying capacity.
That's it.
And we've
Thank you for that.
well past the carrying capacity of the Earth. So now, and here comes a good example, I think. Within Earth Sciences, you have this a course called ecology.
Mm-hmm.
And what you notice is that the way Earth functions and the way it sets up is that everything is circular. So all the material is reused. Think about the fact that we are drinking the same water
Mm-hmm.
as the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
They've drunk the same water as we're drinking right
Mhm.
now. Now, if you look at profit, that's more of like a straight line. Something goes in, profit goes out.
That's it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And another thing is that most of the cycles in Earth are limited. If you think about the water cycle, just take the total amount of water on Earth, that's your limit.
Yeah.
You can't have more than that. If
Yeah.
you're thinking about gold, there's a total amount of gold on Earth, that's it.
That's it.
If you're thinking about oxygen, there's a total amount. Trees, total amount. Animals, total amount. Organisms, bioorganisms, whatever, count them. There's a total amount.
Mm-hmm.
Profit is unlimited. Think about the fact that a lion eats until he's full and then he's done.
Mm-hmm.
And he won't even attack you. Maasai people in southern Kenya will touch his tail
Yep.
when he's eaten.
Mm-hmm.
Now, profit doesn't do this.
Nope.
Profit just goes on and on and on and on and on. And there's only one being that we know that does the same thing.
Yeah.
And we're in lockdown because of it. It's
That's
a
it.
virus.
That's it. That's it. It's exactly that. And it's in French we call it a puits sans fond, so a well without bottom.
Yeah.
And it's also used in psychiatry and psychology to
Yeah.
describe people who have this thing. They go from one thing to the other and just keep on hoarding and getting and just taking without getting satisfied and without angle
Exactly.
and with no limit.
Yeah.
And it's exactly this behavior and this type of attitude we have to nurture it again.
Exactly.
Or we should not let people we have, unfortunately, some
Yeah.
like tendencies to have that kind of behavior,
Yeah.
be what is it? Being managing the earth, pretty
Yeah.
much.
And
That's
this
pretty
is,
much that.
and when coming back, so as you see, as we're going through this, we're just chilling and
Yeah,
having
yeah,
a
yeah.
conversation. But as we go through this conversation, we come back to this idea of nurturing all the time.
Of course,
The
it comes from
biggest
education.
revolutionaries have come from
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
right nurturing environments.
Mhm.
And I think to be able to solve things such as racism, such as environmental problems, such as inequality, we need to talk about the way that we nurture ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
And what we are nurturing for?
Yeah.
Because this society has been nurturing for the endless goal of profit.
Yes.
Profit of a nation.
Yes.
Over another nation, over nature, over another human being.
Yes.
That was education.
Yes.
But now there is this waking up with the ecology, with
Yeah.
now social movement,
Yeah,
Black
yeah,
Lives
yeah,
Matters, and many more to come, I'm sure, with this coronavirus thing. This
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
the beginning.
It's just the
6
beginning.
months only in 2020.
Yeah,
we have
come
6
on.
months to go.
We have you're complete. Yeah.
I mean, it's just a reaction in chain
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
of
chain
things that
reaction,
were bound
definitely.
to happen.
Yeah.
And just this corona thing, it's also in the books back in the 1800s. They
Yeah.
warned it. The overpopulation of Earth will lead to famines and to disease and to
Exactly.
that. It's shown in all the species, even in plants. They
Do you
studied
know?
it.
Do you know Fermi's paradox?
Which one is that one? Not the Fermi's paradox. I don't know.
Oh man, I
Enlighten me.
think this is something that nowadays really keeps me occupied. There was a scientist, I believe, in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was an astrophysicist or something. And we just started our journey to finding out if there's more life outside of our planet or in our
Yeah.
solar systems or whatever.
Astrobiology.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
They had classes in university about that. So.
And this man Fermi thought, why, if there's so many habitable planets, why aren't we finding any life on them?
Mhm.
Is there a reason? Could there be a reason? Now, this
Yeah.
thought was in his mind, and he started theorizing. Now, this is where I become a bit technical, but if there's a species on a planet, let's say humans on Earth,
Yeah.
to be able to technologically grow, we need to subtract things from our environment.
Mm-hmm.
But we are also very dependable of that environment.
Yeah.
So you could say the more technologically advanced we get, the less support we will have
Exactly.
from our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Up to the point that we're technologically super advanced, but our environment cannot carry us anymore and it collapses.
Yeah.
Now, his idea was, what if this is what happened on other planets with other species?
Mhm.
Because this is not an only Earth thing. This is a
No.
planetary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Planets have boundaries.
Yeah.
And species that are dependent on those planets have the same boundaries as the planet has.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what if there would be a so-called filter in which a species becomes technologically so advanced that its environment is unable to
Sustain.
sustain him, and it
Yeah.
collapses, and the species collapses with it?
Mm-hmm.
What if we're on the same road?
Yeah. I like this little like side thing. No, but it's very interesting, and
You know?
and you know the Western world has based this idea of race based on the fact that people that they encounter and civilization were not able to think as scientifically and
Yeah.
artistically like
Yeah.
the way it was doing. But after my graduation, my main interest was to actually learn more about primal tribes and you know, primal culture, like Native American in the US,
Yeah.
Aboriginal and all those things, and the relationship they have to nature, of respecting it. You take something, you thank it, but you have to give it back. You be
Yes.
thankful. Don't take too much. Just take a little bit, and
Yes.
always respect it.
Yeah.
This was wiped out
Yeah.
because they didn't get it, because for them it was profit and we have
Exactly.
to survive because of fears or whatever.
And
They
please,
just had to-
don't forget that the stock market
Yeah,
is a concept that started in the Netherlands.
it is.
The Netherlands had the
That's
first
true.
multinational. So this idea of profit
Mm-hmm.
is a very Western thing.
Oh, it is. It is only.
And
Western,
think
yeah.
about, why are all these cultures open to all these Western missionaries and their ideas coming to their countries? Because the culture of Indians and Native Africans, or Native Americans, I shouldn't say Indians at all, Native Americans and Africans,
Yeah.
is to be open,
Yeah.
to give back what you take.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons, because you're talking about, relatively compared to Europeans, people from Africa and people from Native Americans
Mhm.
are peaceful.
They are. They were
They're
a peaceful
full-
nation.
yeah.
That's what they were saying. They live in harmony despite the little tribal wars they have from time to time.
Exactly.
They live in harmony, and they live in a
They
different
live in
way.
harmony.
Yeah,
yes.
it was a different thing. It was a different way of waging war, not the same as us. with just
Exactly.
religion and things. It was just
Yeah, and that's I think is also one of the biggest, when you go back to the race discussion,
Hmm.
the way that people of color have been peaceful about it is, I think, one of the biggest compliments.
It's that's something I still don't. I can't wrap my mind around
yeah.
it.
I saw a film on Instagram a few days ago, or I think about a week and a half, I think, where a woman said, America is lucky that what we're fighting for is
We're not-
equality
Not revenge.
and not revenge.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Wow.
yeah, it's and pay back
Yeah.
and actually get a refund.
Exactly.
Because I always bring that, speaking about this, I always bring the fact of I will talk about the racial profiling by the police in another podcast with another guest, but we pay taxes
Yes.
and we're paying that police,
Yes.
and that police is treating us like this.
Badly. Yeah.
I want a refund about that.
Yes. And I
All the
think
tickets I should have like.
what I do
want a
think is and that's the funny thing about it, is that this is our generation.
Yeah.
We're millennials,
Yeah.
but Generation C will not be taking shit.
Oh no, hell no.
They're the rebels.
No. Oh yeah.
I mean, think about it. These
Yeah.
are white kids, black kids, Moroccan kids,
Yeah.
growing up together,
Yeah.
correcting their parents.
Yeah.
So to me, sometimes it's like, you are in for if you're
rough ride.
you're in for if you're not with it now,
Yeah,
the next generation of kids
yeah.
is they're gonna be ragamuffins about it.
Yeah, more, man.
You know, they're gonna be street. They're gonna be protesting. They're gonna be
Yeah,
breaking shit because as more generations grow up together, they understand the idea of togetherness and they
Mhm.
understand their relationship among each other, and their relationship is based on emotion.
Yeah.
It's not rational. It's not in a book.
Emotional intelligence.
Yes.
That's another intelligence that's developed on the other one.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that, but unfortunately, I don't think everyone is on this. If we would put levels, not as a competition, but more, not everyone is on the same emotional intelligence.
No, not
at
at all.
the moment.
No.
And
no.
this is another evolution we haven't taken in account because everything has been, we see it in the schools, everything has been attributed to literacy, to letters, to numbers, and that's pretty much it.
And that's
Letters and numbers.
Yeah, it's rationale.
Now the arts are getting in a little bit, but still people are saying arts is useless. It's not
Stay
a useless.
out, blah,
This
blah,
is
blah.
a new
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, if they were not artists, there wouldn't be any
Man,
revolution.
Art
And
is
people will
very
be
important.
so bored. I mean, music. Talk about music.
Listen,
art.
man, have you seen the paintings of Ludwig Deutsch?
Yeah.
That, to
Yeah.
me, was the first time I was confronted with African
Mhm.
royalness, which was an actual oil painting. I think in 1863 or something in that period.
I don't really know. I don't really remember about the time, but that seems pretty.
For the
pretty
people
exact,
listening, Ludwig Deutsch was a rich, the son of a rich man. He was, I think he was Swiss or German, somewhere there, or from
I
Austria.
don't know exactly.
Somewhere
yeah.
there. And he took a trip to Egypt. He was a painter, took a trip to Egypt, and made portraits, I believe, in the royal palace. And you see these black guards,
Big guys.
big guys with golden shields and
Yes.
golden spears, and oh man,
Big guys.
and also because I found Ludwig Deutsch through an Instagram account that I followed,
Yeah.
Legacy Bros. And Legacy Bros is like it's not an internet, it's not mine. It's just if you're interested in this discussion about racism, you're
Yeah.
gonna want to see this Instagram page because they focus on black bodies in art.
Oh,
In
that's pretty
paintings.
interesting. Yeah.
So you see these beautiful paintings, also old paintings
Mhm.
of black people in their prime and showing the wealth and the richness of your history.
Yeah.
And when I saw those paintings, I was like, these are the paintings that should be shown when we talk about things like Egypt. Don't just show like, okay, there's pharaohs and blah, blah. The palace guards are an amazing sight to see. And they actually tell the story about how black bodies have been involved in building the Egyptian empire.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the significant things that lack. The history itself, the stories itself are so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like the big kingdoms in Mali.
Yeah, in
And-
the middle of Africa.
Yeah.
And they were not called Mali because I would love to know the regional names of those kingdoms because
Yeah.
unfortunately Mali is a colonial name.
It's a colonial name, yeah.
And
yeah,
and
yeah.
those tribes have been and those kingdoms have been split apart
Exactly.
by the colonizer.
Yeah,
And this is
yeah.
why we have so many wars in Africa now because of that. That's
Because of
also the
that,
end up
yeah.
of the colony, the consequences of
Yeah,
that
yeah.
of those things.
But if you go through that history, you will be enriched.
Yeah.
Do you know the story about King Sumbi dos Palmares?
not at all.
Yeah,
man.
man. The thing is that we have to do our own
Yeah, yeah,
studies.
Yeah, yeah.
And so during the time of slavery
Mm-hmm.
in South America,
Yeah.
Brazil
Yeah.
to be precise, you had marrons.
Yes.
So you have the black people that came
Mhm.
on the ship, worked on the plantation for 2 days, and were
Yeah.
like, you know what, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Then these marrons, they had their own little settlements.
Mm-hmm.
The Portuguese word for the settlements is called a quilombo.
Okay.
And think about this. There has been a quilombo in the central central Brazil, somewhere central or central east Brazil, somewhere there, of 30,000 free slaves. It's not a quilombo, it's a kingdom.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And they have defeated the Portuguese 2 or 3 times. It was only because of treachery that King Zumbi was betrayed.
Informants.
Yeah,
Spies.
informants. He was betrayed, and
Yeah.
that's how his kingdom fell.
Yeah.
But think about the fact that 30,000 Maroons had a stronghold. And that's the story of why all these other Maroons from the smaller ones
Mm-hmm.
went away from the from the
From the kingdom.
no
Not
from
the
the plantations,
Okay.
because they heard there's a kingdom somewhere and we need to leave, and they just left. And I think these types of stories. There's also a story of a black slave that learned how to write, and he wrote a note to a governor of a state somewhere in the Guyanas to free all the slaves, and they couldn't imagine that a slave could write.
That one I knew about that one. In the French Guyana or something. Like
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I think these are the interesting types of stories that you don't, and because I'm going now, and people think that slavery it was some white hand that wrote, okay, slavery is let's stop doing this, we don't like it anymore, you guys are free now. It is
man.
because of the immense pressure
Yes.
that the African Maroons
Mhm.
and the people on the plantation put.
Of course.
They didn't have an other choice.
Yeah.
So slavery wasn't abolished.
Yeah.
They freed themselves.
Exactly. You did ask for it. They
They-
asked for it
yeah.
everywhere, and this is also in a. I think I mentioned in another podcast. Like, if you want something, you need to go get it. You need to ask
Exactly.
for it. It's not going to be handed out to you. I mean, if you
Exactly.
want something out there in the society, are you waiting for it, or are you going to go ask for it?
Exactly.
It's the same. This is exactly what this is about,
Yeah.
and why we have to be so active about that. We have to ask for everything we need,
Yeah.
everything we want, and just be
Get it.
structured and organized.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is how the kingdom worked really well. And also some of my favorite organization, the Black Panthers.
Yes. Same thing.
The same thing.
Yeah.
So jumping back on what you were talking about the presence of African American in the Old Kingdom and
Yes.
of Egypt with the pharaohs and all that. There is
Yeah.
a great book every colored people should own. It's the Niles Valley Contribution to Civilization. So Niles, Niles, and it's written by Anthony Browder. So that book I recommend. You can have a look. I'm not going to tell you more. Just go check it out. Like The Myth of Race. Those two books. Just
Yeah.
you should definitely own that. And let's wrap up on something, man. That lead me to the wrap up of his podcast. You've been
I think a positive note, or a way that we could end the podcast, is probably talk about the way the discussion is now held across the country, across countries. The fact that the George Floyd killing or lynching, we would call it, has had such a big effect among all colors of people worldwide. That means we've now, if you would, and that's what I like to do. I like to just compare and benchmark with previous protests.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to the 60s, we see mostly people of color.
Yeah.
On these marches and in these protests. And that means that the discussion was segregated itself. So the discussion in itself was segregated.
I think that's only some photos and videos we see. You know, the
Yeah.
one especially from Birmingham, Alabama. But
Yeah.
if you see all the videos and photos, example from the protests of the Black Panther or the liberation of some
Yeah.
Black Panthers and everything, there are a lot of white people.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
So people just select carefully which
Exactly.
images they show.
Are
So
shown.
There were
Yeah.
white people already, but it was hidden.
But now what you see in the media is that you get this idea of this complete mix of people that understand what racism is.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important event. I think that's a very important, one of the most important findings is that now you have white people explaining to other white people on a landscape level of media
Mm-hmm.
at the important shows what racism is.
Yeah.
And why certain traditions can't be traditional anymore.
It can't be kept.
It can't be kept.
No.
And what you also see is still that I understand that this debate, that this subject needs to be talked about on a landscape level.
Yeah.
But for example, in a debate on a landscape level, on a show, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I think the quality of the debate
Yeah.
is strongly dependent of the host.
Of course.
You know? And in my opinion, if you don't have a host that tries to understand you, but just tries to contradict you,
And test you.
test you,
Yeah.
then you have a different debate and a different outcome. And what we're seeing now on media is people being contradicted and tested in shows,
Mm-hmm.
and people getting to the room to explain in shows.
Yeah.
And I think, at least my opinion is that people are now constantly talking about, these protests, I see them as a black thing versus a white thing, etc. But I do firmly believe in the fact that this is about people that understand their roots and relation with racism,
Yeah.
versus the people that don't. And the color of your skin is not even an issue at this point. It's about racism.
Mm-hmm.
And racism is not you can't personify racism.
It's not a thing of color, because if you would take the idea of racism, there is also racism within the whites,
Exactly.
with the Aryan race,
Exactly.
with the aristocratic,
Yeah.
with the wealth. There is also racism.
There's also systemic racism
That's
in
it.
there.
Exactly.
And I think the way that the debate is now given in the Netherlands is, in a way, it's called, I could call it's a positive thing, because we see all these movements coming from this Black Lives Matters,
Mhm.
these Black Lives Matters protests.
Yeah.
And then you have all these people that are resisting it. And to me, the only reason that you have to resist a movement is because you don't understand yourself. You don't understand your history and your relationship with these movements.
Or the only reason you will do it is because you have something to gain, a profit.
Yeah, you have a
And
stock, you have a
something to lose.
profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think looking at the nature of the protests now, I think we can be pretty happy about the progress that is. It should have been there a long time ago.
Yeah.
I completely agree. But at least we are the generation of people that we don't have a Nelson Mandela in our generation. We don't have all these great persons in our generation. But I do think that the millennials are going to have the first generational act.
I think it's our strength not to have a leader, because when you look at all the big movements, social, civil rights movements, and of the past, once you took down the leader, as they always did by murder, of imprisonment, of whatever
Exactly.
they did, or shutting down the person, the movement was dying.
Yeah.
But what makes it difficult with this movement of Black Lives Matters and everything is like you have many leaders.
Yeah.
And you have many people taking the initiative
Yeah.
and doing it their own way and just going up.
Yeah.
And that is a strength. We found a leader in unity, in the same consciousness.
Exactly.
Not a leader in one person. And we're breaking something of also a symbolic thing of the patriarchal society.
Yeah.
The father leading the family and one person leading. And this is what we're breaking.
Yeah.
We just like on the same level, everyone is speaking, and by its contribution, lifting up the movement.
Yeah.
And it's moving forward. And this is the best thing you could have.
Yeah.
And you cannot take that down, or you have to take down everyone.
Yes.
Because the leader, there is none.
And then what I think is really, really beautiful about it is that racism is no longer a subjective experience
Mm-hmm.
of one person or a group of persons.
That's it.
It's become a manifestation in society.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing that development going from it's a subjective experience of a
Mhm.
group of people that fight to get rid of it,
Yeah.
to becoming a manifestation in society,
Mm-hmm.
I think we as a generation have made that step because we grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
and we understand the relationship that we have amongst each other. My best friend is white.
Yeah.
And that's my best friend.
Mhm.
And he's been eating from a Surinamese family for most of his life.
Yeah.
So for him, opposing racism doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I understand.
You know?
Like same for my friends. Why they don't get it?
They don't understand.
Well, they get it, and
They get it, and that's why they don't understand why people would oppose. It's a natural way of
Yeah.
treating each other, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
because we have educated each other.
yeah.
Because me and him, we grew up ever since we were 8,
But it's also a healthy relationship.
and it's a healthy
He
relationship.
doesn't
Yeah.
find that profiting from you in a way that is negative and
Exactly.
deteriorating you will be doing himself any good. He is a healthy individual.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, not everyone is healthy as this, and this is what we have towards to having more
Yeah.
people healthy and working towards a healthy consciousness and a healthy society,
Yeah.
and which is I think the let's put it in a theory, but a salvation of ourselves on this earth.
Yes.
And working on that pretty
Yeah.
much. On
And I think that the solution to getting there
Mm.
is nurturing each other in the right way.
Yeah, pretty much. Nurture, going back to all those things we talked about, nurturing the earth, giving, not take too much, and then nurturing each other, and just like we're trying to do here, giving.
Yeah.
I mean, we have nothing to profit of spending hours and minutes talking and discussing this thing, but just to giving and making sure the next generation don't
Exactly.
go through what we had and just give them our knowledge.
Give
and,
them our knowledge.
and
Yeah.
what we've been through and what we've been able to, like you said it perfectly, take all those emotion, go through it, process it, analyze it, resume it, and then bring it out in very simple, understandable, and open-minded way that everyone can understand, and with a message that is universal
Yes.
and not only for one person. And that is really the thing. So just pass it on, and yeah, that's the goal, exactly. Moving from profit to benefit, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Yeah.
have said it
Yeah.
in any better way than you just said, man. I think we completely agree.
Well, perfect. Yeah, that's great, man. Well, I think we can wrap it up on that one.
Yes.
We give people the being a restaurant, the good food for thought. I think podcast. That's perfect, man. This is you see, I'm starting to just like flowing with words here, and
Exactly.
but yeah, dude, it's been fantastic to have you for on this podcast, and the amount of knowledge you brought to people with your scientific background mixed with my anthropology knowledge and
Yeah.
those things is just
You get to a constructive
Yeah.
discussion
Yeah.
to where we should go, and
Yeah.
maybe even provide solutions for people that are in a discussion right now. If they've listened to this podcast, then maybe they have other tools to have
Oh,
this
yeah.
discussion with other people. I think
Oh
it's
yeah,
important.
oh yeah. You always open all the doors, and as we said and I've said before, go check the facts.
Yeah.
Be critical of what we're saying. This is our
Exactly.
own opinion
Yeah.
based on our own life, our own experiences. This is not the truth. This
No.
is our
This is
way
our
of
truth.
living and
Yeah.
principles. That's exactly that. So you have to double check, and
You
it's
have
always
to.
good to have feedbacks as well. So if
Yeah.
you have anything to say,
And I
just-
think this one would be then a message to people of color, is that we've been through the emotion.
Yeah.
It's time for us to get constructive and actually lay the foundations,
build.
build something.